My name's Teah Smith. I'm an entomologist and agricultural consultant for Zirkle Fruit Company, which is located in Selah, Washington, and I'm based out of Wenatchee, Washington. Zirkle Fruit Company is a vertically integrated company that grows apples, cherries, pears, blueberries, and wine grapes across Washington state. In addition, I'm a Washington Tree Fruit Research Commissioner who has been working in the tree fruit industry for 23 years. Our mission is to find science-based solutions for numerous challenges that face Washington tree fruit growers and packers. And we seek to provide a dynamic interface between academia and industry to foster the communication and interactions to benefit both communities. At Zirkle, we have adopted farm management practices that support and protect pollinators through habitat implementation, integrated pest management, and pest mitigation techniques. In addition, we have acreage under the Be Better certified program through the Xerces Society.
Wonderful. Danielle?
Hi, I'm Danielle Downey. I don't know if you can see me. Can you?
Yeah, we see you.
You can, okay. I can't see myself. I see Candace in the slide, but I am the executive director of Project Apis M. We have been talking a lot about the honeybee, but in science name, the honeybee is Apis mellifera. So Project Apis M is referred to as PAM, but our focus and our mission is to fund and direct research to enhance the health and vitality of honeybees and crop pollination. So it's a nonprofit that was formed 15 years ago by beekeepers and growers. And that was at a time during colony collapse panic. And they were worried about finding answers to the questions they needed to understand to protect their bottom line. So really our focus is on the health and vitality of honeybees through funding research. But as you've seen, there's a lot of issues with honeybees and forage. And so the other part of our work has become replacing forage on the ground to have natural nutrition for honeybees. And we give away free seed to growers who want to try cover crops. And we have technical advice. So if you want to take a step and try to use blooming cover crops in your growing practices, we'll give you free seed for a couple years and answer questions to make sure that you can get past some of the barriers to give it a try.
Excellent. Allison.
Okay. Yeah, it's odd. I can't tell if you guys can see me because I only see you.
We also see you.
All right. I work for Pomona Farming. I lead the marketing strategy and account development operations. What that means is I essentially create connect end consumers with our responsibly grown ingredients. So we develop investments with selected retail brands, and we create transparency through our evolving vertical integration efforts. And then I manage the broader marketing of our sustainable farming practices, hence me participating in this panel. Pomona has nearly 100,000 acres under direct management. About more than 50 of those are in California throughout the Central Valley. Most of those are in almonds, although we also grow pistachios, wine grapes, some walnuts, olives, and raisins in California. And then there's about 42,000 acres on the island of Maui, which is a whole diversified agricultural project where there's, grass-fed beef. We'll do coffee there, macadamia nuts, citrus, tons of citrus. And also we're doing a lot of, tropicals, row crops, which go to local markets and other local food channels. I think that's about it. Yeah.
That's a lot, Allison. That's a lot. How about Luis? Is he here? I actually don't see him.
You're muted.
Thank you, Candace. Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. So I'm Luis de la Garza, General Manager for Rancho Royal Oaks. We grow the berry patch. We grow organic strawberries, raspberries, blackberries, and blueberries. All the fruit goes for Driscoll's. We employ over 600 seasonal employees here in Watsonville, California. And we use bees to pollinate all of our crops. We're using a few technology to try this year and see how we can improve the pollination and also use the bees, to carry some products, some medicines to cure some diseases. We try to promote hedgerows and native flowers for the bees. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody. We are going to get into the discussion now. And so we all kind of understand what the flow of this is going to look like. Danielle's going to kick things off and just kind of give us a general overview of the bees and what has been impacting the bees. I know we have all kinds of conversations that have taken place. So some of this will be familiar, and you'll be starting to recognize many of the themes, the consistent themes around this conversation. Then we're going to get into how is this conversation unfolding around the growers? How are the growers involved? Is it meeting the expert, or are the growers and the conversation involved enough so that it can be impactful for them? And then we're gonna touch on some of the really important conversations around pesticides and how the evolution of chemistry could impact agriculture and the bees. And then we're going to wrap the conversation up with some exciting examples of what Teah is doing on some of her farms, and also the great research that Danielle has been leading up. So we're hoping we're going to leave everybody on a high note for what the future of the honeybees is looking like. So first, Danielle, I'm going to ask you, can you give us some background on the different kinds of bees and how they play a role in the agriculture production system?
Sure. So when we say bees, many people think first of the honeybee, but there's actually, as Marla said, this is kind of a recap of what she said very well, but there's 4,000 species of bees in the US. In California, there's about 1,600. And most of them are solitary. So it's each bee finding her own spot to nest, usually in the ground or in a twig, and foraging within a pretty close distance to raise up babies in that nest. There are bees that are social, like the honeybee. There's only one bee that produces honey, and it's the honeybee. And the one bee that you can put in a box and move to where you need it to pollinate crops, in many, many thousands of foragers who are ready to burst out and pollinate whatever flowers are within several miles of that location. If they have to go that far, they can, is the honeybee. So the reason that we talk about honeybee and the reason it's become such an important partner to pollinated crops is because we can move it around in a very strong force and have it come out and pollinate. So they're different that way because there's so many in one hive, and we've learned to manage them in a mobile unit that we can truck around. That said, for example, in almonds, we know that almonds require about 85% of the commercially managed bees in the US every year to pollinate. So that's a pretty small margin of error. And when bees come to almonds, there's usually the dead of winter in most places around the US, and the bees are lost over winter. And so there's always this mad scramble in the spring to be sure that the growers and the beekeepers are going to be able to meet the need for pollination. Will they have enough colonies to meet their commitments and be good partners to each other? So that's why the 4 Ps that Marla mentioned: parasites, pathogens, pesticides, and poor nutrition. And when we say poor nutrition, we mean forage on the landscape. Will the agricultural efficiencies have really reduced the amount of blooming other things to support all kinds of pollinators? And so fortunately, we know that if we can just get a little bit more blooming plants on the ground, that we're helping not just honeybees, but all bees. So there's a lot of collateral benefits to soil and to a variety of species of bees. And then of course, other things that need habitat just by putting back some of that forage.
Wonderful. Thank you, Danielle. I'm just going to remind the panelists. So we're going to get into a lot of the meat and potatoes of this conversation where you all complimented each other so well. So please make sure that we're having a good conversation and jumping in wherever we can support each other. So the next question for Allison. You had so many great insights that around how the conversation is evolving, and do we have the right combination of stakeholders that are participating in this conversation? Can you share some of what you are witnessing on this subject?
Okay. From my perspective, sort of our perspective, it doesn't feel like almond growers are, especially large almond growers, are engaged at the right levels. I know that the Almond Board is doing terrific work. And yes, the Almond Board is representative of the almond industry as a whole. But it just, in terms of, we're a very large almond grower. We're one of the largest almond growers in the state of California. And as we're working with retailers who are expecting various B certifications or asking about various B certifications, some are easier to do than others from the perspective of the large grower. So all of our acreage is certified through the Pollinator project. But when we looked into Xerces, I've told has made it easier for large growers to meet their requirements in terms of like how much land has to be adjacent and dedicated to bee acreage. But again, like at 15%, it's very hard if you're a large grower to get some adjacent land and make it 15% of your total acreage, and then dedicate that to bee habitat. So so I believe Xerces has made the adjacency thing much more reasonable, and again, that's helpful for large growers. And I think they've also either relaxed or changed the way that spraying may need to happen. However, when we dove into the legal complexities of it, it just there are foreseeable scenarios where they would essentially have control over our business, and we just can't let that happen. And we can't lose a third of our crop if something happens, and they would have control over whether or not we could spray or use some particular crop management system. So we just can't do that. So we decided that we can't do Xerces. If industry or retailer consensus becomes that for whatever reason, the certification from the Pollinator project is not strong enough or good enough or whatever, then honestly, we're going to end up with other large almond growers who have experienced this, and we will be possibly creating some different type of certification that we're pitching to retailers sort of on our own. And that's not ideal without the likes of you all helping us create something that is meaningful and has validity with the scientific community and academia and with people who actually work with bees. So that seems to be like where it's going from one perspective, because Xerces already has this credibility in the marketplace, but it's not feasible from as it stands now. It's not feasible for certain type of operations. It's just not.
Do you have any suggestions of how you would like to see more growers especially of your size and scale, get more involved in the conversation so you can represent that voice a little louder?
You know, I'm honestly, I'm not sure. It doesn't feel like, I'm sure that there's a lot of bee conversations happening, yet I don't know about them. So I can't really comment on what I don't know about. I know that there's something happening in California that's very industry specific, or it's gathering industries. So, the almond board is a member, and, the Western growers, somebody is a member, and, other industries are members, and they're purposely not including growers. I don't know why. But to the extent that organization gains traction and creates, good policies, maybe a better certification system, like whatever it is that it's doing, I don't know why you wouldn't include large growers of especially almonds, given that the bloom is like the biggest event in period in the country for the year for the honeybee community. So I don't know why you wouldn't include some large almond growers in that.
So Allison, like we said, when we were preparing for this panel, here in Washington State, we work really close with our growers. I mean, is that something maybe you guys need to go to your commission and discuss that, the growers need to have a little more say, not just individuals for the growers?
Possibly, and this could be, again, there are growers, large growers with better representation than us as members of the almond board. And so perhaps they feel well represented and as a part of this conversation. Given our size and the fact that we are not a part of this conversation, seems odd to me, but we're newly this big. So perhaps we're an anomaly. We've grown quickly. We weren't always this big. We're not Blue Diamond, who's always been ginormous. So
I do think, the significance of what you're saying is we've heard time and time again that the solutions have to be realistic and you have to work for everybody along the supply chain. So making sure that the right voices are around the table will be really, really important to that.
I think there's a lot of invitations for you, Allison. I think certainly there's a lot of coalitions happening where you would be welcome and a valued voice at the table. And I think it's a really good point to make that, what Teah is doing at Zirkle is at one end of the spectrum. And then we have, you're working with Pollinator Partnership, which is a less stringent certification to get. And I think it's important that in my organization, we work hard to meet growers where they are and see what they can do to make a start. Because if you make it feel like it's all or nothing, then people give up and they don't try. So I think, for example, starting with cover crop and see if it works around the edge of your farm or in between your crop rows. That's a step that you can take and see if it works and make incremental change towards of certification. I think the all or nothing mentality really hurts everybody in the end. So I think it's important what you're saying, that it seems unattainable.
And to be, I don't want to misrepresent our company and as if we aren't doing very much for the bees. I mean, honestly, we have 5,000 acres of cover cropping and varieties that bloom year round, and, bee sanctuaries, and, our, 750 beehives winter at our 3 bee sanctuaries. So like we're probably one of the most bee friendly and of almond growers. So I don't want to say that.
And you work with Flagstone, who is making a lot of marketing material about helping bees. And Flagstone works with Project Apis M. So certainly what you're doing is making a big impact. It's a shame that you feel like you're not doing enough, because you're doing a lot of great things.
Well, we're trying. We just, we're growers and we're not really marketers. I don't even have a marketing background, and I'm in charge of marketing. I'm an economist.
All right, I'm going to keep the conversation moving along. Thank you so much for that, Allison. I would like for us to step into the conversation around pesticides, and we all know that there can be a very lopsided perspective on pesticides. But as growers, this panel, you all know just the importance that they play on the farm. So, Louise, I'm hoping that you can talk to us a little bit about the significance of pesticides on the farm, and then also about the evolution of chemistry and what that's starting to look like in the form of precision agriculture and really just having more sustainable production systems.
Yeah, so we moved to grow berries organic for one of the main reasons was to help the bees. So there's not a lot of pesticide that we use in organic. We don't, our toolbox, is limited. So, but we're trying, bulk vacuums that we call. So we try to reduce the use of pesticides and try to use the vacuums, to control the insect that we don't want, and those are a little bit more friendly with the bees. We do that early in the morning or late in the afternoon. If we need to spray, we spray in the night. So when the bees are inside the boxes, we have tried some boxes that you can close during the night, so to make sure all the bees stay there. But if it's a sunny day, you don't want, to have them inside the box. We're using a new application from a university from Oregon that helps you navigate the different pesticides and select which ones are friendlier with the bees. So I'm not an expert on chemicals, but the technology is there. They are, making, progress on making more selective pesticides, so to be more friendly with the bees.
Very helpful. And I know, Danielle, you had some great examples along those lines on the significance of neonics and how that impacts the bees.
Well, neonics have become very famous as a pesticide that's very toxic to bees, and they are toxic to bees. It doesn't take very much neonic to kill a bee, but I just like to use this as an example to point out the advances we've made in controlling crop pests. And just like many ways that agriculture has become so precise and so efficient, a neonic pesticide can be taken up. You just put a small amount on the seed, it's taken up into the plant, and then the pest that tries to bite that plant gets exposed to the compound and dies. So this is a very elegant and precise way to target a pest that's going to eat the plant. The alternative before we had systemic pesticides was to blanket apply something that would kill many more incidental insects, whether they be beneficial or pest, in the orchard. And so I think it's easy to vilify a compound and say get rid of it, but as a grower, you appreciate how that tool can be used, and sometimes it's the best one in the toolbox to use. Does it have some collateral damage in the nectar or the pollen? There's science that shows yes and no, and we still have a lot to learn. It's hard for the science to keep up with the advances in chemistries, but I just like to use that example.
We find that true. Technology is helping. We're piloting something called Weeded, which is a camera that you put on the end of your tractor, your vehicle thing, and attach it essentially to your pesticide. And the camera sees chlorophyll. So a little weed sitting next to your brown tree, and then that little weed gets sprayed, just the little weed, not spraying the whole row of the tree. And it reduces our pesticide application by like 75% or something like that. And so it's a much more targeted application of the now non-neonics, not using any neonics because everybody hates them, of the less effective pesticide. Yeah, but no, we love this technology, but for a small grower or for somebody without the capital, I mean, this stuff is not cheap. So
yeah, and same thing, like Luis said, here at WSU, they've actually created a program that shows you the effects of the pesticides, not only on your pollinators, but also on your natural enemies, which is very beneficial to our growers. They go in and use it to try and figure out, how they're going to control their pest problem. The other thing with that, like Danielle said, was, the importance of still having those products or those AIs available. It's very important for growers to have a complete toolbox to control many of the pests that we face. And this doesn't mean that we need to use that product or these products all the time. But I think the reason we are where we are with people thinking that, pesticides are so bad today is that, there's the overuse of pesticides, and there's the lack of integrated pest management techniques such as monitoring and pest population, which we heard from the last panel as well. And so instead of just spraying, we need to go out, monitor, and determine how we're going to spray. At Zirkle, part of my program is we not only monitor the pest population, but we also monitor the beneficial population to determine whether or not we even need to spray. Maybe the natural enemy population is of the right size out there, and we'll get the pest population under control. In addition to that, each year the list of products our buyers won't allow us to use continues to grow, and our toolbox continues to get smaller. And this isn't just for organic growers, but also conventional growers. And I think this comes down to the lack of education between the grower and the consumer. We actually here in Washington State used to have the schools come out and learn all about the apple industry and how you go from tree to plate. And that's something we don't offer anymore. And I think there's just that real big disconnect of what it really takes to grow fruit or any crop. So
I think that highlights also, Teah, just the importance of having the right people around the table. Retailers are representing consumers. There's all kinds of consumer groups and activists involved. And so much of this does different forms of education. Knowledge is power. And so we have to hear everybody's story.
Right.
I want to start to transition to the exciting technologies that are coming, some of the work, Teah, you have a great segue there too. Can you tell us more just about the efforts that you have going on there in your program and some of the new technologies and approaches that you're taking?
Yeah. So one of the things I'll dive into, which we heard about earlier, was regenerative ag. At a few of our orchards here at Zirkle, we've implemented regenerative agriculture. And one of them, we've actually been doing it for 2 years. This year is our first year across about 850 acres for one of the farms that I actually work at. And as most of you know, this is a conservation and rehabilitation approach to food and farming systems. So in my experience with this farm, the results we've seen quickest are in cherries versus our apple crop. And what we've seen is an increase in size and luster of both the leaves and the fruit, and we've seen an increase in yields. In addition to that, we've seen an increase in resistance to disease and insects. So blocks where I usually have aphid populations or mildew, we're not really seeing that by using this regenerative ag. And like Christine said earlier, regenerative ag is different in different places. So what we do here is we take a sap analysis. So we take leaf samples, send them off for analysis every week. And then based off of that sap analysis, we give each block a prescribed micro and macronutrient spray, which doesn't harm the pollinators or the beneficial insects. You have no REIs with the product, so you can have your crews in there working. And so, I mean, it's been amazing. Since implementing this, we've seen a reduction, like I said, in pests, or we're not having any pest pressure. And then also reduce the use of pesticides. My pesticide bill is significantly decreased. And you're just giving the plant exactly what it needs, which is, it just makes sense. If you have a healthy tree, you really shouldn't have any problems. So I'm hoping this is the way of the future, that we'll move into regenerative agriculture and more people will be up for adopting it. Candace, did you want me to go into a few other ones, or do we have time?
I think we're closing in
Okay.
on our time. So thank you so much. And, you know, without putting you on the spot, Teah, I guess I want the audience to know that you have so many great examples of the work that you guys are doing up there. So, you know, I hope if there's a grower that I'm telling them, they can all call you and learn from you. Okay. So if your inbox starts blowing up, you can blame me.
You can also check out all the cool stuff that's going on in Washington by visiting the Washington Tree Fruit Research Commission webpage. It talks about all the research that's going on here in Washington State. And much of this, like I said before, is industry working with academia. So there's lots of neat stuff going on.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Danielle, you also have some great examples. Can you leave us with just, you know, some of the projects and research going on that that is energizing you in your operation?
Sure. Well, I have to say that some of the most exciting stuff I see, which isn't exactly research, although Project APSM has sponsored over 140 research projects. So I certainly have a lot that I could talk about, but seeing people come together and from all levels, from the retailers and the supply chain, which we'll see in the next panel, from consumers who care about bees, and the growers. The California Pollinator Coalition is trying to bring agriculture into the conversation, and agriculture is so important for helping bees. And really, that's where a lot of change can make a big difference. So just seeing the partnerships and the coalescing of interest around bees actually become implementable and have these conversations is the biggest hope, I think, that I'm excited about today. But in terms of research, Project APSM does a lot of applied research to try to help beekeepers predict their attrition, to help enhance the health of honeybees. So that indoor storage picture that you saw John Miller put up, and Teah's also talked about Washington State University. Project APSM has just launched an indoor storage guide so that beekeepers that are thinking about how can they use indoor storage in their business have a user's guide about the questions to ask and how to build a building like that. They're quite expensive and you don't want to mess it up. So having a technical best management practice document like that really, I think, helps adoption. We also work on things like queen longevity. Honeybee queens have had some problems and we're not sure why. So we're studying how to better make queens last. We have a project that's looking at honeybees that have a natural behavior that resists the varroa mite. So you don't have to apply a pesticide and they keep their mite levels low. So we have a lot of very exciting projects that are aimed at answering very applied questions for growers and beekeepers.
Wonderful. And Danielle, is there a place also if people are interested in learning more about some of that? Can you direct everybody?
So projectapsm.org is our website. We have a whole database of research projects that you can search and see a lot of what's been happening over the years with bee health research.
Wonderful. Well, I know we're at time, so I'm going to say thank you to all of the panelists. I think it's been a great discussion. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, your farm operations, and the good work that you guys are doing.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Candace, for facilitating such a great conversation, and many thanks to all our speakers as well. That was really an enlightening conversation.